action.
Welcome back to QUSN. I am your host, Sam Vito, here on our esports talk show. I am here with my good friend and Valorant Champions Tour expert, Vishesh Kumar. Vishesh, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, as a big fan of VCT and someone that's relatively well-informed about the league, with the recent changes that have begun to happen with a lot of roster moves, especially with duelists going from Osboss moving from MIBR, or moving from
he left
Lev to MIBR,
Yeah.
or Tens retiring, Saucy retiring. Has there been any move thus far this offseason that really stuck with you that you think is going to make an impact?
Okay. I mean, obviously, if we're talking about roster moves, we have to talk about Ye, right?
Yeah, okay.
Dude, he went to Bleed. He failed out at DSG. He failed out at Bleed. And now he's at EG, but he looks pretty good. So, I mean, I'm excited to see his comeback. EG is looking good. You saw Mata goes to NRG.
Mata from MXS is a good pickup by NRG there.
Right. I was watching the Sen City Invitational, right? C9, so far, a weak team. I don't know. I don't think that they made enough roster moves. We'll have to see. Sentinels is a completely new team. They have 2 new players. That'll be fun to watch. It'll be interesting. I mean, I don't know. And obviously, you're right. Aspas to MIBR. You know, what is that going to be? MIBR was not competitive last year, right?
And you bring in the best duelists in the world to throw together a roster.
Right. So surely there'll be at least a little competitive.
So with all of this kind of recent roster churn and all these teams kind of moving around, are there any kind of standout regions or teams that you think we should look forward to this season?
I mean, everyone's got to have their eyes on EDG, right? They just won the World Championships. Everyone thought that they were going to be a bad team, and suddenly China is already the world champion the second year into the league, right? EDG, I mean, Kang's insane. Most of that roster's the same, right?
I think it's pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, Hao Dong, I think, is gone.
Hao Dong's gone?
But,
Okay.
I mean, then they won Worlds. So
yeah, like,
they're really
you can't
good.
complain too much, right?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, EDG will be fun to watch. I'm curious to see Fnatic just signed a new guy. Hero is gone now, so we'll see how they play.
And that roster kind of is in a bit of a sad state of affairs with the way that Dirk's contract is looking like it's going to work out this offseason and kind of how their coaching situation has been over the past year and a half.
Yeah, they got the new coach, right?
Elma Putty or something like that.
Yeah.
He's definitely needs to take time.
He's no mini.
He's no mini, absolutely, no.
For sure.
But yeah, so one of the things that I've noticed a lot too is with like teams like G2 and like you said, Bleed, these kind of G2 fringe teams and their like fight to make the new tier 1 list. With the lack of changes to the structure, do you see tier 2 legitimately having an opportunity to be a league to watch?
I mean, look, you can definitely watch it, right? Are the games going to be as competitive? Probably not as competitive, right? But when you're watching the top few teams in the tier 2 scene, they all look really good. Like, for example, let's take M80, who turned into G2, right, last year. They were on top of tier 2 for the last couple years.
Or not M80.
They were, the Guard. The
Guard,
sorry.
yeah, before the Guard went bankrupt.
Yeah, speaking of M80, those
speaking
poor
of M80,
guys,
they just went bankrupt.
Those poor guys just lost in the finals twice in a row. That's gotta suck. But, right, the Guard, they were a dominant team in tier 2. They came to tier 1, and G2 was a good team. They made it to champs. They were actually better than most of the teams in tier 1. So, I mean, yeah, tier 2 definitely has some skill, right? But is it going to be as interesting as tier 1? Probably not, right?
I think the real question with tier 2 is going to be, how do we keep these tier 2 rosters intact with obviously tier 2 is kind of a developmental league, right?
Yeah.
You're bringing in guys that are young that don't have a ton of experience to play on lower level rosters. New talent, right?
Yeah.
But do you see a way that we can have a fulfilling tier 2 system without a lot of the poaching of players and roster churn on these lower level rosters.
I mean, this is a perfect example to look at M80, right? Because they're one of the only tier 2 teams that didn't change their roster for a full year. They made it to grand finals of Ascension. They were right about to qualify for tier 1 and they lost. So they ran it back. No other tier 2 team does that, right? Because it's usually not worth it. It's not tier 1, you're not making as much money, the views aren't as high, right? But they decided to run it back and they lost again, and guess what happened? Their entire roster blew up. Because there's no way they're doing that again. Unfortunately, the way that tier 2 works, as long as they pay lower salaries and as long as there's not as much people watching, you're not going to have teams stick it together for the whole ride up tier 2 to tier 1, right?
All right. So we're running out of time here. One last question for the road, and keep it quick. Who do you think is going to be the best player in VCT this year?
Kang, EDG Kang. I mean, come on. That guy's insane. Let's be honest. He's insane.
And that's all the time we have here for QUSN. I am your host, Sam Vito, and my lovely guest here, Vishesh Kumar. Once again, thank you, and have a good night.